We can cold open with True Detective.
Yeah, okay. We talked about it last episode, but you went and caught up and finished the whole third season. So
I did.
Where did you kind of land on that?
I really liked it. I really did. If you haven't already, you can check out my little write-up on kinetoscope.ca.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed certain aspects of this season more so than season 1. I think season 1, and I went back and watched a few episodes, was more gripping and more edge of your seat because it dealt with a lot of drugs, guns, gangs. You didn't get that in season 3. But I do feel like season 3's ending was stronger because I think one of the weaker parts about season 1 was the ending, how McConaughey and Woody Harrelson basically end up having like this big final boss battle.
Yeah.
And it's kind of those genre things where like in a crime thriller, the bad guy has to die this like horrific death, sort of the death to end all deaths.
Right.
You don't get that in season 3. It's kind of open-ended, which I really appreciate because as a crime thriller detective series, I think some answers or some questions are better off left unanswered for a more dramatic effect.
Yeah. How does the philosophy or the existential kind of crisis side of things work into this season? Because that was the nihilism of the first season was kind of one of its defining traits.
Yeah, so Pizzolatto definitely moves away from that, and I wonder if it's because the studios asked him to. Because in this season 3, there isn't a lot of talk about philosophy or religion or human morals. It's more about characters fighting their own demons and coming to terms with who they are as people. You get a lot of conflict between people, of course, but it's not Matthew McConaughey's nihilism versus Woody Harrelson's optimism, I guess I should say. But there is that same interplay between the two leads, between Mahershala Ali and Steven Dorff, where Steven Dorff is sort of the more sensitive character, and Mahershala Ali is kind of like the straight ahead, hold no prisoners, let's get this mystery solved type of detective, and the interplay between that is very, very well done. What did you feel about season 1 though?
I was a big fan of season 1, and and it was the thing that kind of pushed me into season 2 and kind of sticking with season 2 and watching that all the way through, even though obviously it's a bit of a challenging watch.
Yeah, I'm surprised you made it all the way through because I definitely didn't. So I think if you really like season 1, you'll definitely enjoy season 3. Depending on what kind of aspects of detective thrillers that you like, you could swing in both directions. But I definitely think season 3 should spawn a season 4, although that hasn't been confirmed yet.
Excellent. All right. Well, on that note, let's start the show. Hello, welcome to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast. Today on the show, we've got a review and discussion of the newest Marvel blockbuster, Captain Marvel. It's been dominating the pre-release buzz for a couple of weeks. There's a lot of different things to bring up with regard to this one, so we'll be diving into that. And we'll also touch on a Netflix movie that premiered a little over a month ago from a favorite director of Jason and myself, Steven Soderbergh. He's taking kind of a different tack with this one, a different kind of story than he would normally do. And we'll also do some previews of some upcoming movies. South by Southwest is on the go right now, and there are some early screenings of a lot of potential sleeper hits and other exciting titles for the next couple months that are hitting that festival right now, so we'll take a look into that. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host, Jason Chen. How's it going?
Not bad. How are you?
Good. I've got my new, a fancy video editing / video gaming computer rig all set up.
Oh, nice.
It's liquid cooled and purring away here, so that was a big project for the past couple of weeks, just getting that all configured.
Did you put it together yourself?
I did indeed.
One of those smart people.
With a lot of help from my brother, actually. I ordered all the parts and they all came in, and the thing is sitting here on the desk as I record this episode, and it's pulsing this very appealing color of gold and orange on the inside of all
cool.
The parts all light up and that kind of thing. So
yeah, I have one of those like LED things in my computer too, and it changes color as you use it. It's pretty cool actually. But now we can game.
Yeah, totally. So we'll have to choose a couple of games and start doing some co-op stuff, because that's half the reason you get these towers these days.
Yeah. So if you guys know any games that you think Rob and I should play,
yeah, totally,
give us a shout out on Twitter or email.
Right now, I'm playing the new BioWare game Anthem. I was playing a bit of that this afternoon. That's got a pretty strong like multiplayer component to it. So
okay,
that's a fun one. But there's all kinds of other ones. But let's hop over into some discussion of Captain Marvel.
I keep having these memories. Something in my past is the key to all of this.
You know how to fly this thing?
We'll see.
That's a yes or no question.
Yes.
So this dropped a couple of days ago from the time we're recording this episode. And it's well, what did you think of it? Because I went into it pretty assured of like what it was going to be. Marvel movies are kind of a certain thing, unless they kind of buck a trend, like something like Thor Ragnarok, for example, or Guardians of the Galaxy. But what did you think?
First of all, I read Rob's review, so if you haven't checked that out, it's very nice, really well written. I liked it a lot. It's on kinetoscope.ca. This is one of those times where I have to disagree with Rob, though. I think I liked it a lot more than he did.
What? Wow. Okay.
I did.
Do tell.
Yeah, so Rob, you're completely right. This is a very, I would hesitate to say generic, but it's definitely an origin film where it hits all the spots where you have a hero that's introduced, flashbacks to a backstory, sort of this hero finds herself in this bigger conspiracy, bigger battle, finds a new purpose, and basically comes into her own as a person. I think that sums up the plot pretty well, don't you think?
Yeah, that kind of rattles through it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason I enjoy this more than I expected, though, is because of how understated it is. I was actually I like the fact that it didn't have like this big, huge CGI boss battle at the end. I liked how it really lets itself breathe. I like the runtime. It's not overly long. I think Brie Larson's performance really is like the connective tissue that holds everything together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And I do find certain problems with the villain, but Ben Mendelsohn and I think Jude Law too were so good. And I think a lot of people sort of criticize the film for some of its exposition in the middle of the film, but I kind of appreciate it because just coming off from Ant-Man and the Wasp, where he becomes this like 50-foot tall CGI character, and then you have Infinity War where everyone turns into dust and it's like this big CGI extravaganza. And granted, there are a lot of like light shows in Captain Marvel, but I appreciate its restraint. I appreciate how much credit they give the audience to figure things out. I didn't need like a 10-minute scene of Carol Danvers basically remembering everything she did. It's implied that she gets it right away, that she's somehow connected to Earth's events and her whole story. I don't want to spoil everything, but I thought it was very well done how it really lets the audience sort of figure things out for themselves, because by this point, like, I think most people are really familiar with the Marvel universe and how it works.
If you were a fan of this franchise at all, it would have been hard to avoid some of the featurettes and the interviews that were being posted in the run-up to the movie. So even if you'd never read a single Marvel comic before, you probably know that she's the character isn't some alien warrior from some distant empire or anything. She's actually a human who's undergone some sort of change.
Yeah.
So that much of it was probably out in the open. The opening of the movie was a little bit. I appreciated the way they did that and they handled the flashbacks there. Where it got a little bit talky for me was when the characters all kind of reunite on this farm in Louisiana, and they're kind of unspooling all of this background material that just in the form of like a conversation between a couple of characters.
Yes.
And for me, that was getting a little bit too talky. I think it would have been better to, especially when they were skipping over details like, oh, that's your dad, and they're looking at a photo of Carol Danvers' dad in like a box of keepsakes or something, and they just kind of say, oh, you didn't have a great relationship with him, and I'm like, well, I'd kind of like to see a bit more of that, just about more of that kind of show don't tell rule, where it would be fun to get a scene with her dad where they're actually like talking back and forth, or maybe a couple of scenes with her in the military. We do see flashes of that stuff. I don't know. I would have preferred that over just, kind of like a Rolodex kind of scene.
Right. Fair enough. I'll have to disagree with you there. I'm actually glad they didn't delve into too much of a backstory. The one thing I do kind of find awkward, and you probably agree with me on this, is that this whole movie, they make a big deal about how Brie Larson's character is like this emotional warrior that acts before she thinks. I don't think they did a good job of showing that. I don't think in a lot of scenes she shows a lack of restraint, other than like a training montage with Jude Law where he outright says you're an impulsive warrior.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people telling her to stop using her emotions, but not a lot of like...
But she's like the most grounded character in that film, I feel like.
Yeah, and we don't ever see her like come close to doing something reprehensible with her powers and like having to hold herself back, and that would have been a lot better. I mean, I guess maybe you could make the argument that the big final scene where she blasts, like she literally just like flies through a giant spaceship hovering over Earth and like doesn't destroy all the others. She kind of just blows up the one and then says, hey, if you keep messing with me, the rest of you are gonna go too.
I really like that, actually.
It was a great scene, yeah, but...
it shows a lot of restraint.
Well, she shows restraint, but she also, like, murders a bunch of people, so...
No, I mean, like, the film itself shows a lot of restraint in not making it, like, a huge, CGI battle, because I don't think it was necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And she, like, there's the final confrontation between her and Jude Law's character where, she kind of, like... first of all, they make a point of saying like, "Oh, she doesn't have to prove herself to him," which was a nice moment, and then she just kind of like tosses him into space.
So you know how Jude Law was starting to go into like a bit of a monologue, and she just kind of cuts him off and responds. I expected that to happen, but I think it's a very nice way to like subvert your expectations in like the tiniest way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because so much of the film is very much an origin story. I think if you could criticize Captain Marvel, I would say that it is not a very exciting film. I feel like it's a very quiet superhero film. There's a lot of quiet moments where her and Samuel L. Jackson are just basically bantering back and forth.
Those were the scenes that suggested to me that if they do any more Captain Marvel films, which I guess they will because she's supposed to be kind of kicking off phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, she's going to be like the leader of the Avengers, essentially, and she's going to get her own solo films. And everything about Brie Larson's performance I really liked, and it suggested that future solo movies could get really fun, and especially if they bring in the kind of banter that she was having with Samuel L. Jackson's character.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you this question: in terms of all the MCU characters, where would you rank Brie Larson's Captain Marvel? I think she's one of the most likable characters in that universe.
Yeah, easily. Yeah. She's very self-assured. She's got a great sense of humor,
but she doesn't overdo it though.
No, it doesn't get like goofy or anything like that. It's just she feels very relatable, and I think that's probably intentional because again, knowing that her character is kind of intended to be the new leader of the Avengers, she's kind of filling the void that presumably will be vacated by Chris Evans as Steve Rogers.
Did you ever notice how much of her story kind of resembles Superman in that she kind of crashes into Earth? She has no recollection of who she was, and then her journey is finding more about herself and then basically picking a side that she kind of like her adopted home.
Yeah.
And I wonder why, if we can get a pretty good Captain Marvel movie when the character is so similar to Superman in that they have no real weaknesses and they've got these like alien powers and they're this like super moral, super powered person, that we can't have a Superman movie that's just as entertaining. I kept getting like Christopher Reeve Superman vibes when I watched this film. I don't know. Am I weird?
No, I don't think so. There's a kind of like optimistic cast to the whole movie.
Yeah, it's not Zack Snyder.
No, it's not Zack Snyder, and just everything about the color schemes. There's a big emphasis on like the colors of the American flag and all of that. So there's a certain amount of patriotism there that you also get in the Superman franchise. And plus, like, the character flies and
She's basically indestructible.
yeah, and there's plenty of scenes of her like kind of like arcing out over the planet Earth, and lots of kind of glory shots of the kind that you often see in Superman movies.
I kind of also appreciate the sort of tidbits of the wider cinematic universe that pops up. So, for example, Ronan the Accuser pops up.
Yeah, big time.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of Lee Pace, and even though his character is way over the top in Guardians of the Galaxy, they kind of tear him down a little bit towards the end of that with that little dance-off scene. And I just liked seeing him here, even if it was only for a minute or two.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like a nice tease for the wider cinematic universe. And because we've already known so much about the cinematic universe, we can kind of piece together certain things. I kind of like that detective part of it because so much of the movie takes place in the 90s, basically the entire thing, actually.
Yeah.
And so you kind of fill in the gaps of the Marvel history between now and, say, Iron Man and the first Avengers. And so a lot of things start to make more sense now. But for the life of me, I can't remember, wasn't there like a Skrull and Kree conflict in Thor Dark World as well?
No, that was another like race of aliens, I think.
Okay, so they were like frost giants or something like that.
Dark elves, I think.
Dark elves? Okay, yeah. See, there's so many like alien races in Marvel now that I'm kind of confused about like who's who, and Ben Mendelsohn comes in with this big revelation. I'm like, I need to reorient myself because all these humanoid aliens seem the same to me.
And Ben Mendelsohn is great. I mean, I actually liked his performance more than like even Samuel L. Jackson's, which is saying something.
By the way, Samuel L. Jackson in that de-aging technology was for once, it was not a distraction.
How much did they de-age him?
I don't know, but he was definitely de-aged.
His hair is real, isn't it?
I don't know if his hair is real or not, but he was definitely de-aged.
Okay.
And it wasn't distracting.
No, I mean, they're definitely helped by the fact that Samuel L. Jackson looks basically immortal. Like
same. He's a vampire.
He's like 71, but he looks like he's 50 in real life, regardless of fancy digital stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So I really like that part. Does it make you more or less excited for Endgame now?
It does sort of make me a bit more excited. I mean, the concept of a character like Captain Marvel going toe to toe with someone like Thanos is. There's got to be some big moment just waiting to happen between those two.
Yeah.
So there'll probably be a lot of like whooping and cheering in the theater. I may not participate, but it would be fun to be there when that happens.
Was there whooping and cheering in your theater? There was none in mine. Although I went to a matinee, so
no, not for this one. But I know that like oftentimes, especially with the Avengers team up movies, when the good guys get one over on the bad guys, a lot of the screenings I go to, the place kind of gets a little bit crazy for for a bit.
Does that add to your experience positively?
Yeah, I would say so. Like there's something about watching it with a huge group of people and everyone kind of feeling the same energy.
Yeah, exactly. So other than the fact that you just didn't like some of the exposition, was there any other part that you felt didn't live up to expectations? Mind you, I came into this probably the same as you, with expectations generally like not high, but I knew what I was getting into. Yeah,
I wouldn't say I went in with any particular expectations. I mean, I think for me, it's just it feels so much like a standard Marvel movie. You've got, from my perspective, you've got Marvel movies that maybe I would say like of the more than 20 of them that there are so far, like 90% of them are all pretty much the same. They're shot the same way. There's not a lot of variance in the way they're written. But then you do have certain movies like the Guardians movies or Thor Ragnarok that I always go back to, or even Ant-Man, that have just enough of like an extra dose of comedy and self-awareness to them. That's where I really go to when I'm like sorting out my Marvel ranking is movies that they tune up, they move past just the pure superhero stuff, and they kind of get a bit introspective.
You didn't find that it was very or there were any introspective moments in Captain Marvel, or you just didn't think there was enough?
Just not enough. Yeah, it felt too much like just a classic origin story to me, at least on the first viewing. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll circle back around and watch it a second time and feel a bit differently.
It's kind of amazing that I think for a very tight and focused movie, that this movie had 2 directors and I think 5 or 6 different writers.
Right, yeah, and that can be a bit of a recipe for failure in other situations.
I know, right? And so, yeah, so I was plenty surprised that it turned out so smoothly.
I don't think I've seen the previous work by these directors. They were like indie directors, weren't they, before Marvel hired them?
Yeah, so this is like their big project, I think. It's Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden, I think.
Right, so they're known for like indie stuff like Half Nelson, which was
Half Nelson is fantastic.
That's a Ryan Gosling movie about a teacher who's addicted to drugs, and
yes.
Then there's a kind of a tragic comedy with Zach Galifianakis called "It's Kind of a Funny Story" that Anna Boden made. The fact that they jumped from movies like that into a huge multi-million-dollar blockbuster is always an interesting shift for a filmmaker. No, nothing against Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, but if they're coming from a perspective of making like pretty straightforward dramas and comedies and then hopping over into Marvel, maybe they just haven't developed their voice enough to really make a really distinctive Marvel movie.
Yeah,
but that's all it is. I mean, the other side of this whole discussion is, of course, the fact that this is the first Marvel movie featuring a female hero as the in the lead role, and for a lot of people, that is a really big deal, justifiably. There's a lot of women and girls out there who have been waiting for Marvel to make a movie like this. And I think for them, it doesn't really matter how much of a game changer this movie is in terms of scripting or plotting or cinematography or any of those technical things. For them, it's super important to have a movie like this just for representation. It's not quite the same as the discussion that we were having around Black Panther, because the two communities that we're discussing have very different struggles. Yeah, for a huge chunk of the audience, they really won't mind some of the more generic stuff.
I think final verdict is that Captain Marvel's a pretty solid film.
Oh yeah, it's very solid, yeah.
I don't think you can really go wrong. I think if anything, you should go watch for Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson's performances. And Goose, the cat. The cat is hilarious.
A lot of people are making a lot of fuss about Goose. I sort of understand it, because there's some revelations around Goose that are kind of funny in the third act.
Yep.
The one thing that Goose made me think of was actually Roger Ebert's old comment, where if a character like Goose pops up in a movie and you begin wishing the movie was about that secondary character, then maybe
something went wrong,
because the stuff that they reveal about Goose is kind of like, whoa, so where has this thing been all this time, and how did he get to this point, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's just kind of a funny little distraction. The only other thing I'll mention, just a funny little thing that popped into my head when they were about to roll to credits, is Captain Marvel is given this leather jacket to wear when she goes off into space, kind of a keepsake from her former life on Earth. And I was thinking to myself, how is that leather jacket going to stand up to the vacuum of space? Because I definitely believe that her like formerly Kree outfit is with the helmet and the mohawk and everything. It will give her all kinds of protection against deep space, but I mean, that leather jacket's got nothing special about it. It's probably gonna shatter into a billion pieces if we were following the science. But I guess maybe her superpower is keep it safe.
Yeah, not to mention it would burn up in the atmosphere.
Exactly. Yeah.
But she's probably got like weird superpowers, like basically protecting her with all the clothes that she wears and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm sure. And for all I know, it's been covered exhaustively in the comics. There's already been some explanation for how that works.
The one sort of point I was kind of thinking about, and I was going to throw this idea at you, was that, is this the first Marvel film that uses popular music exclusively, like for certain scenes?
No, well, what do you mean? I mean, they definitely do it in like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, that's true, eh? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that from Guardians of the Galaxy, which I didn't expect, but I think it's a nice touch. I think they don't hit you over the head with the 90s nostalgia, which I appreciate. Although there are numerous references, it's not front and center, which I like.
And here's the problem. I'm such a bad 90s kid. I didn't pick up on half of those references.
Oh,
I don't
really?
know. Yeah, like people were talking about how they, certain songs on the soundtrack just jumped out of them and like gave them a real nostalgia trip. That went totally over my head. And maybe for that reason, I didn't feel quite in sync with the movie because I was missing some of those needle drops.
Anyway, that's it for Captain Marvel, I think. High Flying Bird, interesting movie.
But we are in a lockout.
There are no actual games to watch.
You think these fools, these rich white dudes, gonna let these sexiest sport fall by the wayside?
This team's my family. I need us to be one big family again.
Football is fun, but it don't sell sneakers. To move merch and inspire rap lyrics, they need your services.
Yeah, so this is a Netflix original from Steven Soderbergh, who it's probably fair to say is a favorite of both yours and mine. And Steven Soderbergh has been kind of doing a bit of a comeback, as it were, into movie directing. He took a bit of a hiatus from movies a few years ago, went and made a period drama called The Nick on Cinemax, I think it was. But he's come back with a movie. Well, he made Logan Lucky there a couple of years ago, and he's had a bunch of projects in the pipeline in various other states of completion. But this one was shot entirely on an iPhone and posted on Netflix as an original. And it's not the first time that Soderbergh has directed an entire feature-length movie on an iPhone. He made one with Claire Foy called Unsane. I think it was last year or the year before. But the other detail about High Flying Bird is that it's about a topic that I don't think Soderbergh has ever really explored before, and that would be like professional athletic world. Because this movie is all about the NBA, the National Basketball Association, in sort of like a fictional version of real life where there's this massive lockout of the players underway and has been underway for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it follows a sports agent played by Andre Holland, I believe, who some people might remember from one of the segments in Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. And Andre Holland plays this agent who's trying to navigate a way through the lockout situation and represent the players that he works for, make sure that they don't go hungry, essentially, because they're not being paid, maybe figure out a way to actually end the lockout through very unconventional means. You know, for a guy like myself who doesn't follow professional sports at all, other than it was kind of fun to watch this movie, go in for Steven Soderbergh, but actually learn a little bit about pro sports in the on the backside of it. So that was kind of cool.
As a film, though, what did you think?
I liked it. I mean,
there's a hesitation there, Rob.
As a film, they kind of assume that you know quite a bit about pro sports going into it. So I felt myself having to play a little bit of catch up, just trying to stay on top of some of the terminology and everything. You don't really get lost in it. It's not, Soderbergh does a pretty good job of writing the script in such a way that there's definitely more value for people who are super familiar, but people like myself who aren't familiar can still follow along. The cinematography is really interesting. You kind of see some of the limitations of the iPhone as a filmmaking tool, some of the weird stuff that the camera does in different lighting situations, and the stabilization can look a little bit wonky at times. So that's kind of an interesting thing, but it does kind of line up with some of the themes of the movie, where he's got a lot of characters who are experiencing the lockout purely through social media. And the solution to the lockout, as it's presented in the film, without spoiling anything, hinges very heavily on smartphones and social media. So the fact that the entire movie is shot that way, as if there was some omniscient narrator carrying an iPhone around and capturing all of the events that we see in the movie, it kind of makes sense. There's a justification there that I appreciated.
What's the sort of meaning behind High Flying Bird? Is it kind of like an Icarus kind of nod, where a player, I don't know, his star shines too brightly and he somehow crashes and burns, like we see in a lot of sports movies?
Yeah, no, I feel like the title is it's one of those movies that brings up the title literally in a piece of dialogue.
Okay.
But I can't remember what part of it or what exactly it references. It doesn't seem to be an Icarus reference because
Okay.
Andre Holland is primarily representing this number one NBA draft pick. This guy who would have been one of the hottest new players in the game if the lockout hadn't have happened. His character spends a lot of time trying to work with this player and manage this kid's online popularity in such a way that it might force the NBA Players Association and the NBA owners to come to some sort of agreement and end the lockout.
Right.
So maybe the reference in the title is to that kid that he's representing. They also have these chunks of documentary interviews interspersed throughout the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Real life players who are shot in black and white with what appears to be, I can't tell if that was iPhone as well or if they used a fancier camera for that. But they are asking these kids, what was it like for you when you were draft picks for the NBA? What kind of lessons did you have to pick up in your first days and weeks as part of the team that you were chosen for? And they kind of bracket some of the scenes that are portrayed by the cast with these chunks of interviews to kind of give you some context and understand the sports world a bit.
I see. Final rating?
I would say 4 out of 5.
Oh, okay. So solid film.
Solid film, yeah. I would say if you're into sports movies at all, definitely check it out.
Okay.
And if you're a Soderbergh fan, easy win. I pretty much love everything the guy makes. So
with the way you describe this film, it feels like a very much like a Sex, Lies, and Videotape sort of deal.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen Sex, Lies, and Videotape, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is where like there's a overarching narrative going on, but it's spliced with like documentary footage or quote unquote documentary footage and different interviews, and it's just edited in a way that only Soderbergh could do.
Yeah, so he's the editing here. I mean, I think he does all the shooting and the editing, but he goes with his classic twist of using a pseudonym for the cinematography and for the editing work. I think when he's editing his own pictures, he calls himself Mary Ann Bernard or something like that.
Why does he do this?
Well, I don't know. I forget if he's ever talked about it in interviews, but it might have something to do with like union rules or something.
Oh, could be. That's what I figured would be.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's anything preventing you from crediting yourself with everything. You just need to have the right, I guess, membership into the right guilds, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure how that side of it works, but
okay.
But yeah, editing is definitely an important part of High Flying Bird.
Right.
The way they structure the narrative and the way they kind of insert a little chunk towards the end that kind of rewinds the events a little bit and shows the sort of, it's almost like a heist that gets pulled off.
A heist?
And we know that not in the traditional sense, but we know that like Soderbergh is a huge fan of heist movies. And has made several of his own, and he kind of structures the solution to this NBA lockout as a sort of heist where the characters have to run a scam or a play in such a way that they can get the achieved result, but through maybe underhanded or manipulative means.
Okay.
Yeah, and the editing is a big part of helping you understand exactly what the characters were pulling off and how they had to present what they were doing in one way so that they could get a different result.
Right. Okay. Anything else you're looking forward to coming up?
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got South by Southwest is on right now.
Yes.
And a lot of the kind of, not the big blockbuster movies, but smaller independent movies and other kind of art house type stuff is getting its first screenings there, getting some early reaction.
The Beach Bum just played there.
Yeah, so the Beach Bum from Harmony Korine, people might know Spring Breakers, which he made a few years back with James Franco. This is a movie that puts Matthew McConaughey in some very comfortable territory, playing this kind of ne'er-do-well beach bum of the title, long hair, kind of hippie clothing, and it seems to be a story about McConaughey's character just sort of stumbling into some sort of like criminal investigation or something like that.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Korine's work, there's not really like a sort of like going from A to B sort of story. It just kind of meanders and it kind of paints you a picture of what things could be, and then just kind of leaves you.
Right. Yeah. So sounds like the initial reaction to The Beach Bum is a little bit mixed. It's not tracking very well on Rotten Tomatoes currently.
As always with Korean's films, like I think it's very divisive.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact reasoning behind some of those early critic reactions, but I think maybe before I watch The Beach Bum, I'll have to go and watch Spring Breakers, because I missed it when it came out originally, and all I ended up seeing were like little clips of some of the more outrageous moments with James Franco's character.
Yeah, which make no sense if you watch it on its own, right?
Right, exactly.
It looks like just James Franco with cornrows partying it up and doing too much coke. That's all it is.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also a few big names coming out. Jordan Peele's Us, and Jordan Peele is following up Get Out with that film.
Of course, Jordan Peele won an Oscar for his script for Get Out, and kind of like he just went stratospheric essentially with his capital in Hollywood. People are throwing projects at him left, right, and center. He's got a remake of The Twilight Zone coming out. I think he's got another project on as like a YouTube original with a kind of like an anthology format to it. LeVar Burton is involved with that, if I remember correctly. So yeah, Jordan Peele is kind of like on everyone's lips right now, and there was a lot of attention naturally for the next feature-length movie that he was going to write and direct. And with this, he's got a story about a family, a husband and wife and 2 kids. They encounter what appear to be doppelgangers of each member of their family, who begin to torture and chase them. And I don't know if are they supposed to be on vacation when this is happening? I forget the details of the trailer.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, but apparently it's like a straight up horror film. Some people were wondering whether Peele would work in themes about racism, because that had been a detail of Get Out, but it sounds like he's not doing that with this. He's going to tell a different sort of story. Oh yeah, so Lupita Nyong'o's in it. Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men.
Yep.
Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who people might have seen in Aquaman.
Yes, he was good as Black Manta.
Yeah, and another Marvel alum, Winston Duke, who was in Black Panther.
Yeah, M'Baku.
He plays the husband. And then a handful of other people. Tim Heidecker from Tim and Eric.
Awesome show.
The Adult Swim show.
Yeah.
I don't typically go for horror movies, but I do like to figure out maybe the 1 to 2 horror films that are getting the best critical appraisal every year, and see those, because sometimes there is some, if you can put up with a few jump scares and some of the creepier moments, there's some really great filmmaking going on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I'm not a huge horror movie person, although Silence of the Lambs is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's a horror film.
Right.
I just don't like it when it becomes cheap thrills. That's what I
like. Exactly. Or when it's just iterating on the same old, like a spooky kid whose eyes fall out of its head, or a Korean demon that walks along the ceiling.
Yeah, I just had enough of jump scares and things being bloody.
Right. Yeah. Moving on from South by Southwest, though, we've got a couple of other things in the immediate pipeline. DC's new movie Shazam is coming out soon.
Yeah. So is this like a big turnaround for DC? I feel like it is.
If the trailers are any indication, it could be. The Shazam is naturally a more comedic character, because it's basically a kid who gets the ability to turn into an adult-sized superhero.
I almost feel like the DC extended universe kind of tied itself down too much by having to basically fan service all the Batman and Superman fans.
Oh yeah.
So these characters can't sort of grow naturally in the environment that the writers and directors have created for them. And so, as with Guardians of the Galaxy and Marvel, when you have an IP that's not as familiar to people, there are certain things that you can get away with, and you have more flexibility in how you want to present this stuff. I think Batman and Superman have always been introduced and portrayed as these sort of brooding characters. Mm-hmm. And that gets really tiring after a while, because who wants to go see a movie about a billionaire playboy and a freaking alien who's indestructible feel sorry about themselves, right? Yeah. Going back to Captain Marvel, that was a great thing, because at no point does Carol Danvers really beat herself up. There's a montage in the end where it's just like her at like 10 different ages of her life getting up after she's fallen. Yeah. And it's kind of like a great metaphor for her rise from the ashes, I guess. We don't really get that with Superman and Batman sometimes, and I feel like that's a real detriment to the DCEU.
And so it seems like the strategy now with the DCEU is to, unlike the Marvel universe where everything is connected and, you know, every character has an equal chance of appearing in another character's movie if they're not already appearing in an Avengers movie. But the DC Warner Brothers strategy seems to be they're just going to make a whole lot of movies that are very tangentially connected. So, you know, there's no guarantee that any of like the Justice League are going to pop up in Shazam.
There are references though.
There will be references because they want the events of the movie to definitely take place in that world. They're also doing stuff like the Joaquin Phoenix Joker spinoff or the Margot Robbie Birds of Prey movie.
That one's going to be bad, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we were saying that about the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie, and now some people are thinking that might be awesome. So,
I'm okay. Well, count me as a skeptical.
Sure, yeah. I mean, they're rebooting Suicide Squad 2 with James Gunn. So,
oh my god,
you know, who knows what's going to happen? But the point being that you've got a whole lot of like very disparate, disconnected kind of projects happening right now, and it's not clear exactly where any of the characters are going to go once those movies come out, if they're going to go anywhere at all.
Yep.
I prefer to see even a shotgun style approach like this to the very dour, linear attempt to recreate Marvel, but grittier strategy that they were going with when Zack Snyder was around.
I think people see how successful the MCU is and they want to replicate that with their own cinematic universe without realizing that Marvel sort of had this universe built in. All they had to do was adapt it from the comics. So I look at like the monster universe and you're just like, there's no way this couldn't have just been like a shotgun approach with like different films. And if it was successful, then maybe you get a little team up. You didn't have to set up the entire universe right away because it's very hard to do. I mean, Marvel's been around forever.
There could have been any number of times in the early part of the Marvel world where things might have gone sideways if they'd made a really bad movie. But instead they made like, you know, a core number of solid movies, maybe not like excellent movies, but you know, they just built it up over time. And it feels like whenever a studio tries to rush things, the stuff can go a little bit wonky. But what else do we have on the release calendar? We've also got Avengers Endgame, naturally. I don't necessarily want to dwell on that too much because that's kind of like a known quantity at this point.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely explore that a little bit more as it gets closer. And then we've got Tim Burton's Dumbo.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would not have pegged Tim Burton for that particular story. I mean, the original cartoon is a bit darker and more adult than most Disney animated movies. So maybe Burton is a good fit from that perspective. But it feels like he's really amping things up, the darkness and the adult oriented stuff with his version of Dumbo. So will it work for Disney? It's hard to say.
Well, I'm just glad it's not a shot-for-shot remake. So I'm glad that Tim Burton is taking on this project. I think if any Disney IP needs like a bit of Tim Burton touch, it's maybe this one, because the story about a flying elephant is just weird in itself.
Yeah.
So he might be the perfect one for this. Kind of like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I think as a movie, it was really creepy, but there's certain parts that he brings in with his own thoughts and ideas that I think worked really well.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, these Disney live action recreations or remakes of their classic cartoons seem to be making money. People are liking them, even if they have little quibbles with the way the classic movie was adapted. You know, there were plenty of people, for example, with the Beauty and the Beast remake with Emma Watson. They appreciated the nostalgia trip that they went on with the movie, but just maybe felt that some of the little additions that the screenwriters made weren't necessary. The one thing that they haven't announced yet in this world of live action remakes is a remake of Hercules.
Yes.
Where is that? I keep telling people I would pay like $150 at least to see a live action Hercules, specifically with Danny DeVito, live action Danny DeVito with CGI goat legs. I would pay so much money for that.
Did you like the original cartoon?
I loved it. Yeah,
Me too. I loved it, but it gets a really bad rap, eh?
Yeah, well, I did go through a period with it when I was like in university and learning about all the classic mythology.
Yeah.
Where I kind of hated on the movie a bit because I didn't like how it played fast and loose with the myths and kind of made it family friendly. But it had to happen. You know, Disney had to sanitize it because the myths are pretty adult, pretty gory, and full of like sexual abuse and things like that.
The part where Zeus and Hera get along, and I'm just like, that's not how that works.
No, yeah.
They're supposed to hate each other.
So I don't know why they're kind of twiddling their thumbs on this. We need the live action Hercules. We're getting live action Mulan. We're getting live action Little Mermaid, I think.
I mean, it's probably coming.
I need it to happen before Danny DeVito dies or something.
I imagine it's a little hard to do in our current political environment because Hercules is about this really macho dude going around saving people using his muscles and not his brain.
Right, yeah.
I think that's a bit of a hard sell. Although I do find Meg, who is the female lead in the cartoon, a really interesting character, and in her own right was a very strong character as well.
Right.
So, but I just imagine, like, I mean, how many successful Hercules films have there been, right? Not many.
Recently, not a lot.
Many.
No. Did you see the Dwayne Johnson one from a few years ago?
No, thank God I didn't. Was it good?
Nobody went to see it. It's probably one of Dwayne Johnson's like few box office
failures,
failures or underperformers. I mean, I don't know how he would qualify it.
Yeah.
He's well cast for the part because he's well
cast for any part.
He looks the part. He's got the muscles. He's got the wild man beard. But something about the script treatment for this just basically doomed it from the start. You know, they were trying to go with a more realistic interpretation of the Hercules myths, where they would do a scene that had like a mythological quality to it, like he would be fighting a monster, but then they would do a little trick with the camera or with the CGI to kind of reveal that, oh no, it's a far more mundane thing that's actually happening, but the myth grew out of a real battle with a non-supernatural explanation.
Right.
So they kind of stripped away a lot of the fantasy that people like about the myths, and it, took away what made the Hercules special, I would say. So yeah, it probably had a hard time getting any word of mouth because of that.
Right. I think that about does it for our episode. We talked about Captain Marvel, talked about the new Soderbergh film, High Flying Bird. We previewed some stuff. I think the activity, at least for movies, is going to ramp up. We got festivals coming out. We got big releases coming out over the next month and a half.
Yep, we got Netflix's new Triple Frontier. Their kind of big action movie with a director I really like, writers I really like, and a core cast that I really like. So it may still be really, really like basic and non-innovative, but I'm gonna watch it anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it'll be at least good eye candy. And let's not forget, Game of Thrones is starting in about a month, so we'll probably touch on...
Oh boy.
Yeah, we'll probably touch on that a little bit. Rob and I are both big fans. When Game of Thrones hit a fever pitch, we were both in journalism school. So that was always awesome to come in the next day and start talking about it.
Yep.
And we'll continue to do that. This is the first season where it goes into uncharted territory because the books haven't been finished yet, and I don't think they ever will, to be honest. But until then, we will talk to you next time. From Vancouver, I'm Jason Chen.
And from Toronto, I'm Robert Snow. Thanks for listening.